In international commentary, I do my very best to keep party politics right out. And I've always been glad when staunch conservative viewers have written to me to say that they appreciated this and enjoyed the programs. But now tonight, I give you fair warning, tonight is different. And Sir Hartley, Shawcross and I are going to put a case for the Labour Party, to which we belonged for 33 and 17 years respectively, and for which we feel, both of us, a great loyalty and affection. Now, of course, we don't know your politics, but we've decided to assume that you're not normally one of our supporters. Perhaps you read regularly the Express or the Telegraph or the Mail or the Graphic. If you do, I expect you're a bit suspicious already of the kind of thing they serve up to you about the Labour Party. But all the same, in spite of yourselves, maybe you've got some wrong ideas about us, and Sir Hartley, Shawcross and I want to try to remove some of them. To begin with, for instance, you may be wondering how it happens that someone so well-dressed, well-educated and well-off as Sir Hartley Shawcross, how he comes to be in the Labour Party. What's your answer to that, Hartley?
Well, my answer, Chris, is why on earth shouldn't I be? It may be unusual to find a working man in the Tory party, but there are tens of thousands of people like me in the Labour Party. You see, I came of an old Liberal family with a long radical tradition, and I was brought up in a London suburb, and I saw something of the two worlds which existed then: poverty, destitution, ill health, in the midst of riches and plenty. Mr. Churchill said the other day that the Labour Party was stirring up hatred between the classes. That's utterly untrue. I hope this doesn't sound priggish, but, you know, we didn't join the Labour Party because we hated our fellow men. We joined it because we loved them.
Good evening. I'm Bill Deeds, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Ashford in Kent. As you just heard, tonight we're presenting the first party political broadcast ever given on television outside a general election. Now, of its kind, this is an experiment, but one we felt we ought to be the first to try. I hope that you will think we were right. We're going to tell you how we've set about the housing drive.
Target we should put in our program should be 300,000 houses a year. I accept it as our first priority in time of peace.
Good evening. You've just seen a picture of Winston Churchill accepting the 300,000 target at the Blackpool conference. And by the way, Blackpool seems to be rather in the news today. Good old Blackpool. Well, I was there too, and I cheered with the rest. Of course, I didn't know that I was going to be given the job of building them then. Otherwise, perhaps I wouldn't have cheered quite so lustily.
Hello, everybody. Here I am in Mrs. Philpott's living room at Northolt. You've just heard my chief, Harold Macmillan, tell you that the People's House saves material. But it saves money too. £150 a house, which is equal to 3 shillings a week in rent. And that's a pretty fair and substantial saving for most people to make. And as you can see for yourself, the room sizes are generous. All the rooms are above the sizes laid down by the Official Standards Committee. Now let's meet Mrs. Philpott herself. Hello, Mrs. Philpott. Thanks for inviting me here. It was very kind of you. Now, after all, you've lived in this house for 9 months. What do you think about it?
Well, to live in a house like this is really a pleasure. This room, of course, is so beautifully big, and Veronica can dance around in it just as she likes. The kitchen is beautifully spaced, and the house itself is draught-proof. Well, my husband and I, my little girl, thinks it's simply wonderful.
Well then, one final point. To keep this housing drive up, obviously a lot of people have got to cooperate with you. Now, how can they help you most?
Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you how you can help. And really everybody ought to help. Because after all, everybody's interested in the housing drive. Everyone can help, whether they're in the building industry or working at any job. Because we can only go on with the housing drive on the basis of a sound, financially strong Britain. And so I've always said that the export drive and the housing drive are really one and the same thing. One helps the other. And surely everyone must be interested in housing. Young, middle-aged, and old. Because a house, you know, when it comes down to it, it means home. Now, lots of us have been very lucky and had good homes, and we know what that means. And we want to have it for other people. And that's why I've really tried to make this housing drive into a real national crusade. Everybody should take part in it. Of course, we're not satisfied. We'll never be satisfied. We've made a lot of mistakes, and I've no doubt we shall make a lot more. But I do think we have made some real progress. And I do want you, if you're anybody who's listening to me, to help us to give the people what they need, a home. Good night.
Good evening. It has been a tragic, terrible week. Indeed, a tragic and terrible day with the news coming in about Hungary. It's been, I think, by far the worst week for the world and for our country since 1939. Last Monday evening came the news of the Israeli attack on Egypt. Israel had been threatened and provoked. She was entitled to better guarantees of her security. But there's no denying that the large-scale invasion of Egypt was an act of aggression. I'm not going to try to apportion the blame. That's really the job of the United Nations. But what should we have done? That's the real question. The Prime Minister says we couldn't afford to wait. We had to act, he said, immediately, on our own, before the Security Council could decide or do anything. Yet what are the facts? By Tuesday evening, even before the 12-hour ultimatum to Egypt had expired, the Council had met, reached a clear decision, and been blocked by the Prime Minister's own veto. There was no lack of speed here. The trouble was obstruction by Great Britain. What should we have done? If only we had supported that resolution and followed it up by proposing that a United Nations police force should see that the resolution was carried out. I don't believe the present Prime Minister can carry out this policy. I bear him no ill will. We have been personally quite friendly. But his policy this last week has been disastrous, and he is utterly discredited in the world. Only one thing now can save the reputation and the honor of our country. Parliament must repudiate the government's policy. The Prime Minister must resign.
It's an election broadcast on behalf of the Labour Party.
This is our television operations room. Throughout the campaign, the leaders of the Labour Party will be speaking directly from here. We've got a sort of permanent staff here. Christopher Mayhew is looking after facts and figures. When there's any interviewing to be done, the questions will be put by Woodrow, Wyatt, and I'm going to give some of the news of the campaign. Britain Belongs to You will be on the air in this form 12 times between now and polling day, on sound and BBC and independent television. Tonight, Hugh Gaitskell is here to open our campaign. Tomorrow he sets off on his national tour, and in future programs we'll be linking up with him from other cities in Great Britain.
Good evening. The most important thing that's happening in the world just at the moment is not Mr. Jasper and his companies, but Mr. Khrushchev's visit to the United States. I don't think we should be too depressed by the rows that we keep hearing about. When we came back from the Soviet Union about 10 days or a fortnight ago, I gave an account of our meeting with Mr. Khrushchev, and I said then that we'd had a pretty rough time. But I also said that after the storm there was sunshine. Mr. Khrushchev is the sort of man, I think, who's rather liable to fly off the handle, but after a bit, when he's had his say, then we found at any rate he was perfectly reasonable and willing and ready to talk seriously about quite important international issues.
But of course, politics is not a question of personalities, it's a question of issues. And as Hugh Gaitskell said, in this campaign, we are doing something of a crusade on pensions on behalf of the old folk. Here is our report.
Kingston-on-Thames. The constituency, until Parliament was dissolved, of the Conservative Minister of Pensions. Compare the posters with the pensioners.
Well, we had the National Assistant Board man come to the house, and he wanted to know the ins and outs, where I got any money in the bank, and what I got off of the council, and all that. And we told him the truth, and we didn't tell no lie. And he said, well, they can't do anything for you. He said, the only thing, he said, you're having a shilling over your odds. I said, well, get outside. That was the words I said to him. I said, I don't want to see you. And he never, and when he sees me now, he's like that, and I give him the same.
Now to finish the programme, as always, with a question to which you are entitled to an answer. Because, remember, Britain belongs to you.
Will the Conservatives give a pledge that if elected, they will at once increase the old age pension by 10 shillings a week before reducing taxation for anyone else?
This is a quiz program, and we have two teams competing who have been selected by an entirely independent research organisation. One team is of young, new voters who have never voted before at a general election. The others, the rest, have voted before. So with the score at 21 for the rest and 20 for the new voters, we come to the last question, which is about pensioners. The question is, are pensioners worse or better off in real terms, that is, taking into account price rises, than they were in 1964 under the Conservative government? I want you to give the answer as a percentage, up or down, that they are better or worse off. New voters?
Better off by about 10%.
No.
15%.
Answer?
Pensions are 20% up in real terms.
2 marks to the rest, 1 to the new voters. That was the last question. Well, that brings us to the end. The final score is 23 to the rest, 21 to the new voters. I'd like to thank the winners, the rest, and especially the new voters who did so well, were so well informed, came so close. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome indeed to this party political broadcast, with a difference, if only the fact that I'm here for a start, but I am here to see fair play speech, and it's the Liberal Party that have asked me to come along, together with lots of good friends here in the audience from all walks of life, and the object of the exercise is that they are going to put questions to Mr. Jeremy Thorpe. Now then, the people who've come along, they know what questions they're going to put to the boss, but we don't know, and Mr. Thorpe doesn't know, from whence the questions come or what they're going to be.
You may recall that at the last party conference last September, the party's president, Mr. Terrell, attacked not the policies of the Young Liberals, but their methods. And I would like to ask you whether you consider that the direct action tactics advocated by the Young Liberals are consistent with a party which believes in democracy, and whether you think that really the existence of the Young Liberals and their propagation of these tactics do in fact render the Liberal Party an unacceptable alternative government.
Well, I think you've got to be very careful what you mean by direct action. If you mean breaking the law, then I profoundly disagree. And I believe that this country is a democracy where people have no excuse to break the law. There are sufficient democratic outlets without having so to do. If I lived in countries like Spain or South Africa or Greece or indeed the communist countries of Eastern Europe, then I might have to break the law in order to make known my political views, and many very courageous people have. So if direct action means breaking the law, then I disagree. But if direct action means a direct protest, for example, picketing an engineering firm, which I'm told is shortly to be done, because they are a firm who, despite repeated requests, pay appalling wages to their work people, or another one which we recently found, which resulted in people earning 17 pence per hour as outworkers. If direct action means that you parade peacefully outside those buildings with placards saying that they are making their profits on sweated labour, that is a form of direct action, I think, of which I would approve.
If we have we've got a we'll come to you in a second. We'll lady at the back, just a change of tone.
What do we say to people who say, we'd love to vote for you if we thought you'd have a chance?
Well, now, I've had this one very often, and it's so very much like the old lady in Devon who said to me, "My dear," she said, "us be proper Liberal, and they've the best candidates and the best policy, but us bain't be going to vote for them." And I said, "Why?" "Well," she said, "us be going to wait till they come top of the poll. Then us will vote for them." And all I would say is that there are 2 million who vote Liberal. There are probably another 2 million who vote Labour, who are Liberals, but they don't want the Tories in. And another 2 million who vote Tory, who really are Liberals, but don't want the Labour Party in. They cancel each other out. If only they all came together, we'd have 6 to 7 million votes, and Bob's your uncle, we'd be off.
Well,
the answer is, in a democracy, you must vote according to your convictions.
Whilst you're on, tell them all to vote together, and then you've done something.
If the lot all vote together, then we are home.
Right. And at this point, would you believe, ladies and gentlemen, that we've run right out of time? Thank all of you for watching. God bless. See you next time round.
I'm standing beside two shopping baskets. One that was bought in 1970, the other in 1974. In 1970, an ordinary shopping basket full of the items that we buy every week cost £5.37. Exactly the same items bought in 1974 cost £8. Now let's take some of these items. Bread, a standard white loaf. In 1970 you could buy it for 9 pence. Today it costs no less than 15 pence. The 3-shilling loaf is here. Take a dozen eggs. In 1970 you could buy a dozen eggs for 19 pence for 12. Nowadays it costs you nearly 40, sometimes a little bit more. Take New Zealand cheddar cheese. You could buy a pound of this cheese for 19 pence in 1970. Today it'll cost you 33 pence. And last of all, that precious item that's fast disappearing, an English roast beef on Sunday. 3 pounds of top side is what I'm holding. Would have cost you £1.20 in 1970. Today, it'll cost you £2.10. The Conservatives say, don't blame us for this massive increase in prices. It's not our fault. World prices have risen. There's some truth in that.
But I promise you that the next Labour government will do every single thing a government can do to keep the cost of living down. We've tried tonight to show you some of the things which can and must be done. Whether we get the chance to do them depends on you.
By this time tomorrow week, the polls will have just closed and you will have cast your vote on the fate of Britain for up to the next 5 years. This time, the Liberals point out proudly, they're giving more electors a chance to vote Liberal than at any time for more than half a century. In terms of candidates since the war, 1951 was the low point in Liberal fortunes, and now just look how things have improved since then to reach this year's peak of 517 Liberal candidates. Now, where's all this new strength coming from? Well, Liberal headquarters say it's a genuine countrywide grassroots movement, and telegrams and messages of goodwill have been pouring into their offices in London. Some from famous people whose names and faces you will know, like Sir Alec Guinness, whose telegram reads, "Dear Mr. Thorpe, I greatly rejoice in the vital revival of the Liberal Party." And from Moira Shearer, every wish for huge Liberal poll on the 28th. Honor Blackman wishes Jeremy Thorpe and fellow Liberals great luck and enormous success. From Derek Nimmo comes the message, absolutely enormous good wishes, and quotes Psalm 115. Barbara Kelly says in hers, "It's not a leap year, I know, but it can be for those who vote Liberal." Jimmy Savile's telegram reads, "Jeremy, you built it up, now let it roll."
I don't know about you, but personally I'm fed up of hearing and seeing the same old quacking by you-know-who on and off the goggle box over the last 10 days. Reminds me of the House of Commons. Labour telling the Tories what a rotten job they're doing. Tories telling Labour they did no better when they were in. For goodness sake, let's get rid of all this hypocritical rubbish. They both did some good things and they both made mistakes. Let's cut the cattle and get on with it. Have the courage of your convictions. Don't let Ted or Harold treat you as though you were puppets on a string. That all they have to say is jump and you will do. You know it makes sense to vote Liberal. It's what the country needs. It's what you need. Stand firm. Don't be swayed. Give us a chance and help yourselves by doing so. It's your vote that matters, not your talk. The only poll that matters is on the 28th of February. Vote Liberal and be proud of it, because together we can do great things, and together we will do great things.
That was Cyril Smith. On Saturday evening at 10 o'clock, you can hear the Liberal leader, Jeremy Thorpe. Until then, good night.
June 18th, 1970. A new tenant takes over an old address and makes a pledge.
Will be at the service of all the people, the whole nation. Our purpose is not to divide, but to unite. And where there are differences, to bring reconciliation, to create one nation.
In February 1974, he finds himself fighting that same battle with more than just a political outcome at stake.
Our message to the militants is clear. We've had enough of you. We're going to get on with the job. It's time to take a firm line, because only by being firm can we hope to be fair.
I love this country. I'll do all that I can for this country. And isn't that what you want to do too? We've started a job together. With your will, we shall go on and finish the job.
Crisis? What crisis? 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 Crisis? What crisis?
Did you or did you not want better schooling for your children?
Guilty.
Now, did you or did you not want to buy your own home?
Guilty.
Did you or did you not make a profit last year?
Guilty. We'll try not to do it again.
Right, you're sentenced to nationalization. That should put an end to it. I put it to you that you, a pensioner, expected to pay less tax on your savings just because you've spent 45 years working for them.
Guilty.
Is it not true that simply because you spent a few years training for a skilled job, you expected to earn more?
Guilty.
Is it not a fact that you failed to buy your weekend joint yet again because you claim they're too expensive?
Guilty.
But I understand that you and your family had a holiday this year.
The Labour philosophy taxes ambition,
Guilty.
enthusiasm,
Guilty.
achievement.
Guilty.
The very things that create wealth, the things that made Britain great. We all know, in the last 5 years, the living standards of people in this country just have not grown the way they could. The Labour government's explanation for this is that Britain has been suffering because the whole world has been suffering. Well, the fact is that the world did have a bit of a cold, but it seems to be getting over the worst of it. In Britain, that cold seems to have turned into double pneumonia. Look at France. Between 1974 and 1978, the average French worker saw his wages, in terms of what they would buy, go up by 60%. In Germany, the average worker saw his real wages go up by over 92%. The average Italian worker saw his real wages go up by over 47%. Meanwhile, in Britain, the average industrial worker has seen his real wages, in terms of what they will buy, only go up by 16%. And it isn't just the French, Germans and Italians who've done better. The British worker has also done worse than, for example, workers in Denmark, Belgium, Canada. It's not that they don't care about the unemployed. They do. And it's not that they don't mean well for our health service or our old people. Of course they do. The Labour Party has always expressed the best intentions in these areas. But it's no good having good intentions if you can't afford to carry them out. You can't pay for better social services with good intentions. Caring that works costs cash. It all seems to come down to one thing: money, and the policies which create it. Labour never seem to have enough. Strange, you might think, when we're paying more tax under this present Labour government than ever before. But despite all this tax they're collecting, they still haven't got enough to pay for the proper standards of social services. And they never can get enough coming in from tax when people aren't earning enough in the first place. So the Labour government has to take more and more of what we do earn to try and pay for the schools, hospitals and social services we all want.
We've always had a sense of humour, and heaven knows we've needed it lately. But we've other characteristics too: a gift for invention, for initiative and for hard work. Under Labour, these talents are going to waste because the government takes too much away in tax. How often do you hear people say, "Look how much they've taken from my pay packet"? So naturally they ask for bigger pay rises to make up the difference. And it's not long before that pushes up prices. Ask any housewife, she'll tell you. This government has increased prices more and faster than any other government since records were kept. The only way to keep prices down is to get production up. And you don't do that by weighing people down with taxes and other restrictions. They don't work for the chance of the exchequer, they work for their families. So we've got to cut the tax on earnings and the tax on skill. Give our people incentives, and once again Britain will be back in the race.
Don't just hope for a better life. Vote for one.
We're coming to the moment of decision. As the tumult and the shouting of the last few weeks die away, and you sit at home wondering what to do on Thursday, I can well imagine you saying to yourselves, if only the politicians would be quiet, if only we could sit peacefully for a few minutes and think about our country and its future and the decision you are asking us to make. I know how you feel. The decision is crucial. The problems facing Britain are very grave. I can't remember when our people have approached an election quite as thoughtfully as this one. We've tried to fight an honourable campaign, to put before you truthfully the choice this country faces. That choice will decide who governs Britain for the next 5 years. It may also decide what sort of country our children and grandchildren grow up in. When all the other questions have been argued and debated in the papers, on radio and on television, there's only one that really matters in the end. What's best for Britain? I've never believed that this country is a naturally socialist country. We're an independent people. We don't take easily to having more and more of our lives decided for us by the state. We don't take kindly to being pushed around. We're good neighbours, concerned for the welfare of others. We regard it as a privilege to say to the old, the sick, the needy and the disabled, "Don't worry, we'll look after you." Now, no one in my position, asking for your support, your understanding, could be unaware of the responsibility that I'm asking you to give me at this moment of decision for our country. To that I should perhaps add the fact, and if I don't, a lot of others will, that this is the first time in our history that a woman could, after Thursday, be holding the highest political office in our national life. It's never happened before, and I know that despite all the changes in our society, there are some who still feel a little bit uncertain about it. I also know that there are others who would welcome it. I've always believed that what matters in politics, as in the rest of life, isn't who you are or where you come from, but what you believe and what you want to do with your life. What matters are your convictions. So as we approach the end of this campaign, I want to tell you the thoughts and feelings that will guide me in government if you place your confidence in the Conservative Party on Thursday. Let me give you my vision. Somewhere ahead lies greatness for our country again. This I know in my heart. Look at Britain today And you may think that an impossible dream. But there's another Britain, which may not make the daily news, but which each one of us knows. It's a Britain of thoughtful people, oh, tantalizingly slow to act, yet marvelously determined when they do. It's their voice which steadies each generation, not by oratory or argument, but by a word here or there, a sudden flash of truth, which makes men pause and think and say, that makes sense to me. Today, if you listen, you can hear that voice again. It calls not for upheaval or conflict or division. It calls for balance, for a land where all may grow, but none may grow oppressive. Its message is quiet, but insistent. It says this: let us make this a country safe to work in. Let us make this a country safe to walk in. Let us make it a country safe to grow up in. Let us make it a country safe to grow old in. And it says, above all, may this land of ours, which we love so much, find dignity and greatness and peace again.
The level it is today.
Well, because polls all show that Mrs. Thatcher is not in an unassailable position.
What would you like to say about that, Mr. Cyril?
Well, I think that's right. I think that what people have got to face now is that clearly the Labour Party isn't going to win. It isn't a united team, whereas we are, although we're two different parties. We are united on our objectives.
In March 1981, the SDP was formed. By the autumn, it had cemented an alliance with the Liberal Party in response to a widely expressed longing for a new force in British politics.
Anyway, what are you going to say tonight? You've got a draft or something?
No, there's a draft of what I'm going to write my election address.
Well, I might like to crib some of it if you can do.
In all by-elections since that time, the alliance has polled as many votes as either Tory or Labour. Clearly, there is still the need for a change from the worn-out party system that has served us so badly. Roy Jenkins and David Steele have been working and planning to make this hope a reality. Their task is to persuade people that it can be done and that it must be done now for Britain.
Well, Roy Jenkins brings the solidity to the alliance which we desperately need. His track record as probably the best Chancellor of the Exchequer since the war, as a reforming Home Secretary, as a man with great international reputation, is of tremendous value to our alliance.
What is very remarkable is that I enjoy being with him and working with him, but it's very rare in politics, because politics is an awful profession for accentuating jealousy. There is no profession, I don't know why, perhaps there are some others, but there are very few which do this to such an extent. And to be able to work with someone in complete confidence and actually getting pleasure out of the relationship, and yet on a basis of equality, is a thing I've never really experienced in politics before, and I doubt if many other people have too.
I think it started because we found that we shared political objectives. We had a common view of what the country required. And then increasingly we have found that we've developed from conversation, from contact, from doing meetings and broadcasts together, that it's almost been a process of cross-fertilization, and that we have in fact become one joint leadership and not just two separate people coordinating together.
Hello.
How are you? And I think we've got to build up this alternative to the Conservative Party.
David Steele and Roy Jenkins, working together for Britain.
It's 7 years since the Conservatives came into power, so naturally you might be tempted to wonder, What would Britain be like today if Labour, or even the Alliance, were in the driving seat? Just how smooth would the ride have been then? For instance, take inflation. Would it be around 5%, as it is today, or would it be out of control? And as for the Alliance, would they even know how to start? But under the Conservatives, our economy is growing. Growing faster than France and even Germany. So the Conservatives have been able to increase spending on the health service by a real 20%. We now have shorter hospital queues and are treating millions more patients a year than were treated in 1978 under Labour. Just think how it might have been in Britain under any other party. Take strikes. They're now at their lowest level for almost 50 years. Do you think that would have been possible under a Labour government? After all, it was the bitter strikes in '78 that helped bring the Lib-Lab Pact to an abrupt end. And what would have been the result of the miners' strike under a Labour government? After all, consider what Labour have already got in tow, including an extreme tendency to pull in the opposite direction. The Alliance, however, prefer you to believe they are firmly in the middle of the road. But the way they almost always vote with Labour indicates their true position. Then there's law and order. Just think of all the groups funded by left-wing authorities with the apparent sole purpose of harassing the police, and ask yourself, what chance would law and order have under a Labour government? And just think how much town hall bureaucracy could increase. And town hall spending? Imagine what left-wing councils could get up to under a Labour government. Which leaves one major subject, unemployment. Would Labour or the Alliance have done better than the Conservatives? Well, Labour's plans for Britain involve spending £24 billion. That's equivalent to raising VAT from 15 to 41%. But economy is something Labour have never been good at. Labour's old socialist model is expensive to run, but they're so fond of it, they're determined to keep it going, whatever the cost. The Conservatives, however, prefer practical solutions to problems. For instance, there are about 500,000 job vacancies in this country because in many cases there aren't the people with the skills to fill them. So this government's created the most ambitious youth training scheme in Europe, in which our youngsters will earn while they learn. And it means that no 16 or 17-year-old need be unemployed. In a difficult age, difficult decisions need to be taken. Labour can't do that because the union bosses won't let them. And as for the so-called Alliance, they have at least two views on every subject. Which leaves only one party which knows where it's going and the best way to get there.
Look, this isn't the first of the Python repeats. It's a party political, so I'll give you 5 seconds to switch over. OK, well, for anyone left, here's some Alliance propaganda. Or with me doing it, impropaganda. So, let's have some jokes. Did you hear about the local council spokesman who said, "We have a policy of equal opportunity for people with criminal records"? Then there was this local council that stopped its libraries from buying certain books. And what did they stop them buying? Fiction. You know the council that fired some of her racist body language? Well, now they've got over 100 teacher vacancies. Don't worry, though. To make up for that, they're planning to hire about 200 advisors on racial equality. Dear teachers, take Bromley Council, please. The proportion of under fives they educate, 1%. Seriously, though, we've heard a lot about extremism recently. A nastier, harsher atmosphere everywhere, more abuse and bother boy behavior, less friendliness and tolerance and respect for opponents. All right, but what we never hear about extremism is its advantages. Well, the biggest advantage of extremism is that it makes you feel good because it provides you with enemies. Let me explain. The great thing about having enemies is that you can pretend that all the badness in the whole world is in your enemies and all the goodness in the whole world is in you. Attractive, isn't it? So, if you have a lot of anger and resentment in you anyway, and you therefore enjoy abusing people, then you can pretend that you're only doing it because these enemies of yours are such very bad persons. And that if it wasn't for them, you'd actually be good-natured and courteous and rational all the time. So, if you want to feel good, become an extremist. Okay, now you have a choice. If you join the hard left, they'll give you their list of authorized enemies. Almost all kinds of authority, especially the police, the city, Americans, judges, multinational corporations, public schools, furriers, newspaper owners, fox hunters, generals, class traitors, and, of course, moderates. Or, if you'd rather be an extremist on the hard right, no problem, fine, you still get a lovely list of enemies, only they're different ones. Noisy minority groups, unions, Russia, weirdos, demonstrators, welfare sponges, meddlesome clergy, peaceniks, the BBC, strikers, social workers, communists, and, of course, moderates. And upstart actors. Now, once you're armed with one of these super lists of enemies, you can be as nasty as you like and yet feel your behaviors morally justified. So you can strut around abusing people and telling them you could eat them for breakfast and still think of yourself as a champion of the truth, a fighter for the greater good, and not the rather sad paranoid schizoid that you really are. And all this explains what we've seen at party conferences. Everyone's sitting there looking grim and bored, and then a speaker gets up with real fire in his belly as well as dyspepsia, and he says, "The other party really are the most awful bunch of rotters, the most left-wing or right-wing bunch there's ever been in this great country of ours, and it would be a disaster if they ever got into power or held on to power. So we must get into power or hold on to power, but there's going to be a tremendous fight, a terrific struggle, and we can't relax and enjoy ourselves. No, we must struggle and fight and fight and struggle and struggle and struggle and fight against these enemies and then struggle a little bit more at the end of that." And then the speaker goes and sits down, and there's a lovely warm glow throughout the hall as if they'd all had tea and crumpets, and everyone looks relaxed and happy and simply radiant with goodwill. Although, if the speaker had said, "We must all have lots of fun and be nice to each other and cooperate in solving problems," they'd probably have lynched him or deselected him or taken all his directorships away. Because attacking our enemies always makes us feel good and excited. In fact, just about the only disadvantage to extremism is that it can never solve problems. But then solving problems is a real bore compared with hailing victory and swearing to smash capitalism and crush socialism and generally feeling good. I mean, solving problems involves frustrating things like listening to people with different views and learning from them, which of course breaks the first rule of British politics. No other party's ideas are any good. Then, the other irritating thing about solving problems is if the solutions are going to work, they've got to be fair. When ask any businessman, he'll tell you a good deal is one both sides can accept. If not, it won't work. But this means that you've got to be fair and balanced, and that breaks the second rule of British politics. Parties represent special interest groups. How can Labour reform the unions when the unions give them 90% of their income? Of course the Tories will reform the unions, but they'll allow self-regulation for the City of London, which gives them a lot of their money. It's a giggle, isn't it? And these two rules are exactly why so many of our problems are not being solved, because the old British system has been the seesaw. First Labour, then the Tories. No continuity of planning from nationalisation to denationalisation to renationalisation to privatisation. And the rest of the time producing those farmyard noises we all know and love from Prime Minister's Question Time. Well, the Alliance is going to change these rules. First, we'll use good ideas wherever they come from, and we'll say when we agree with other parties. For example, we agree with the Tories that we shouldn't disarm unilaterally, although we don't think we need to buy Trident. We agree with Labour about the need to increase public spending to reduce unemployment and to salvage the National Health Service. We agree with the Tories about the need for profitable industry and to encourage enterprise, although we want to share the profits around more. And we agree with Labour on the need to invest in education, although we will pay more attention to raising standards. Second, we'll try to be fair and balanced between capital and labour, workers and management. After all, we are not owned or funded by the unions or big business. And also, we'll try to get the balance right between being tough and being tender. And finally, in a balanced parliament, the SDP Liberal Alliance is ready to work with either of the other parties. Of course, the Tories and Labour say they won't work with us. Well, no surprise, they like the seesaw. The only thing they've agreed on the last 5 years is they don't like us coming in and breaking up their private little power game. But if you want to end the seesaw, if you want balance and cooperation, please support the Alliance at the next election. And not just at the general election, but at the local elections on May the 7th. All right, time for more local council jokes. Do you know what flag the Hammersmith Town Hall was flying recently? And here's the hall in Scarborough, where the local Tory council banned a conference. The reason? The people going were gay. And here's Dundee's town hall in 1980. Recognize the flag? No? Well, it's the PLOs. Now, here's how the Alliance would get rid of extremist councils. A simple answer. Yes, it's dear old proportional representation again. Now, the effect of introducing PR on extremist councils would be happiness, because PR stops that kind of thing at a stroke. So, if you want to get rid of extremism in local government, vote for the SDP Liberal Alliance on May the 7th and add to the number of councils where the Alliance is either already in power or shares control. Not bad, eh? And if you can find one extremist action from that lot, I'll buy you dinner. And just to cheer you up, as you won't be getting dinner, the number of Liberal and Social Democrat councillors in 1977, 900, in 1982, 1900, in 1986, 3,000. Looks as though the time's come.
If you disagree with extremism in our local councils and want to see an end to seesaw politics, please call 0800 400 400. That's 0800 400 400. Or write to Dr. David Owen, the SDP, Free Post, London SW1P 3BR.
I think that the real privilege of being strong is the power that it gives you to help people who are not strong. I think the real privilege of being fit and bright and young, strong, is the ability that that gives you to give others a helping hand when they're not strong, when they're old or disabled or poor or in need. And it isn't a sentimental attitude. I think it's a way of proving just what your strength amounts to.
When he became a member of Parliament, his grandfather, Mary's father, said, That's all very well, my boy, but don't forget that MP means a man of principle.
My father was very funny about it. When I called him and told him I'd been selected for the seat that I have in South Wales, the place where I was living, in the valley in which I grew up, I said, Westminster next stop, Dad. And he said, oh, you don't know. He said, people are funny.
His father had the physical strength, his mother had the moral strength. In fact, she was quite a religious person.
Oh, yeah.
Being deeply religious, what they call chapel in South Wales. She absolutely radiated this feeling of warmth and care and respect for others.
My mother had a great deal of influence, both because she was a strong and intelligent and very loving woman, but also, of course, because she was a very committed professional. And apart from all the other lessons that she taught me, the one thing that came across very directly is that compassion by itself is a wonderful thing, but it's never enough. Compassion needs to be put into action.
I think of the youngsters I meet. 3, 4, 5 years out of school, never had a job, and they say to me, do you think we'll ever get a job? These are young men and women living in a free country, but they don't feel free. I think of the 55-year-old woman I meet, waiting months to go into hospital for an operation, her whole existence clouded by pain. She is a citizen of a free country, but she doesn't feel free.
Both of my parents died at the back end of November and December 1971, within a few days of each other. That was a shattering experience. But I had this immense good fortune of having Glenys and Stephen, who was then nearly 2 years old, and Rachel was born a week after my mother died. And as human beings do, you have to pick it up and get on with it. And I know that my parents' instinct would have been to say, give yourself to the next generation. Think the best things of us and remember us, but get on with life, because life goes on. I'm married to a woman of high intelligence and great independence and immense warmth. And I wouldn't want to be married to anybody who didn't have those qualities. Because I'm fortunate in being married to a woman of independence and of her own views, then people can't understand that that can work in harness, in partnership, in friendship, in deep affection. They assume that one partner is going to dominate the other all the time, which I think is just very immature. I just don't think it makes sense.
My husband and I, who were always very fond of him when he was this lively young backbencher, used to say, well, there's a future leader of the Labour Party. But quite frankly, we thought perhaps he was a bit young to step into it immediately. And of course that was a tremendous liability for him to overcome. People saying he's too young, he hasn't got the experience and so on. He should serve his time in some kind of ministerial office. And he's risen above that. And he's risen above it by his absolute determination not to waver on the policies and not to allow anybody to slap him down, to downgrade him in any way. There's real steel at the heart of that young man.
I'll tell you what happens with impossible promises. You start with far-fetched resolutions. They are then pickled into a rigid dogma, a code. And you go through the years sticking to that, outdated, misplaced, irrelevant to the real needs, and you end in the grotesque chaos of a Labour council hiring taxis to scuttle around a city, handing out redundancy notices to its own workers. I tell you, and you listen, I'm telling you, you can't play politics with people's jobs and with people's services.
when he tackled the question of militant head-on, was one of the most superb political performances I've ever seen. It was a very gripping occasion, and it took real guts to put the issue firmly and squarely before the party as he did then.
I think he's very like Gorbachev in the Soviet Union. He's got a nice smile, but he's got steel teeth.
They say that he's young and inexperienced. Well, that was said of William Pitt, you know, when he became Prime Minister in the 18th century at the age of 25. And his reply was, yes, I know, I am young and inexperienced, but it is a fault I am remedying every day.
I think that because of the way in which people of all ages and every social class feel they can approach me, have a chat to me, whether they agree with me or disagree with me, they know they're going to get a straight answer. And that makes it easy for me to be in touch, keep in touch.
To return at last victorious, we raise our voices high.
Why am I the first Kinnock in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Was it because all our predecessors were thick? Did they lack talent? Those people who could sing and play and recite and write poetry? Those people who could make wonderful, beautiful things with their hands? Those people who could dream dreams, see visions? But why didn't they get it? Was it because they were weak? Those people who could work 8 hours underground and then come up and play football? Weak? Those women who could survive 11 childbearings? Were they weak? Does anybody really think that they didn't get what we had because they didn't have the talent or the strength or the endurance or the commitment? Of course not. It was because there was no platform upon which they could stand.
Confidence, that's the objective. People strong and free because they know that they live in a good environment where, should they fall upon difficult times, they're not going to fall upon tragic times. If they should encounter difficulty, they know that it's not going to lock them out of opportunity for the rest of their lives. That's what we're after.
If you stroke him very gently, though, stroke him the right way, this way, look. Stroke him the right way.
Earlier this year, Rosie Barnes won a famous by-election victory, taking a seat that Labour had held for over 40 years.
Well, I think it was a feeling that the world was getting a much harder place. I have got children growing up, and I felt, what sort of a world were they going to grow up in? And I think I felt, if you don't like the way it is, get in there and do something about it, try and change it. And really, that's why I'm here.
In this general election, the Alliance has 100 women candidates, far more than either of the other two parties. The time has come for change. The time has come to vote Alliance.
Step by step, we are rolling back the frontiers of socialism and returning power to the people.
Hello, I'm Glenda Jackson, and yes, this is a party political broadcast, though the setting may lead you to think otherwise. But there's a serious point to all this, Flora. I'm a very keen gardener, and I know that none of these would flourish without the right environment. I've also been known to talk to my plants, but I wouldn't expect to get very far taking a seed out of a packet and saying, right, mate, you're on your own. And yet that's exactly what has happened to Britain's manufacturing industry. Industry, like plants, needs the right conditions to flourish. Investment, up-to-date tools, good ideas, scientific and technological research. Before the Tories took office 7 years ago, Britain was doing quite nicely, selling its manufactured goods to the rest of the world. But since 1979, that's all changed. We now import far more goods than we export, and that's the first time that's ever happened. Our manufacturing industry has been devastated. I wouldn't want you to go out to make the coffee just yet, but a glance around your own home will tell you how dependent we've become on imports. The cooker, the washing machine, the cassette player, the car, the cutlery, the clothes we're wearing. Not many are homegrown, are they? I'd like to have a good choice of British goods, but that's just not possible at the moment because British manufacturers are not getting the support their competitors enjoy.
This is a glass of pure water. First add pesticides, then add chemical fertilizer, a bit of ammonium, some industrial solvents and some lead, and finally some aluminium. Now it's been turned into a glass of tap water. Unfortunately, I have to drink it. The food we eat today may look nice, but it's not really good for you. Imagine me as a lettuce. To make me bigger, farmers add nitrate fertilizers. To make me more attractive, farmers add pesticides. And to increase my chances of survival, herbicides are sprinkled onto me to kill all the weeds. And finally, to make my looks last longer, I might get a good dose of radiation. A very fine lettuce, wouldn't you agree?
For years now, sewage has been dumped into the seas, and now poisonous waste, which is too dangerous on land, is burnt at seas. Particles from the waste end up in the water, affecting the tiny organisms which are the base of the food chain. In the end, this affects seals, dolphins, fish, and of course us.
"1992 is only a few years away, so it's important that you should meet some of the invisible men who will be governing your life and mine. This man will be helping multinational companies to use up more of the world's resources. This man will be responsible for security throughout the EEC, and that man will be providing business incentives for companies to relocate to cheaper areas than Britain. If you don't recognise them, it's because you've never seen them before, and you certainly won't have voted for them. Because you can't.
You may have wondered why all the adverts you've seen about 1992 have all featured businessmen and women. This is because they're the only people who will benefit from it. It's not about improving the quality of life, it's about improving profits. So there'll be more factories using more materials, making more waste. There'll be more people driving more cars, making more pollution, destroying more countryside. The greenhouse effect is already happening around us. 1992 will only make its devastating effects happen more quickly. The philosophy of more and more will lead to less in the end for everybody.
Since before dawn today, Britain's forces have been in action in the Gulf. Their skill and courage has already been tested. Tonight, I want to explain to you why they are there and what this conflict is about. Our troops are part of an international force. It is drawn from many countries. It is acting under the authority of the United Nations, and its purpose is to end Saddam Hussein's ruthless occupation of Kuwait. He invaded without justification. His army has conducted itself without mercy. If such brutality and aggression are rewarded with success, then we are all at risk. I was privileged to meet many of our servicemen and women in the Gulf last week. Their professionalism is outstanding, their confidence impressive, and their courage undoubted. You can be proud of them, very proud. Each one of them has Britain's wholehearted support and the prayers of all of us for their safe return home. And our prayers are also for you, their families, who carry so much of the burden of Saddam's war. We are no less proud of you. Good night, and God bless. I spent most of my youth in South London until well into my 30s at different houses. But it's a very vivid area. It's never dull, it's always changing. It has a tremendous vibrancy that very few parts of the country would understand. And yet there is an innate friendliness in the area that those people who live there understand very well. Can we turn left into Atlantic Road in a moment, please? I think I'd like to go down there and have a look. This is really the heart of Brixton. Once you come down the main road, turn left into the market. It's where Brixton takes its heart from. And everybody who lives in and around the area is familiar with Brixton Market and goes there and shops there. Can I have a pound of those tomatoes? Nice to see you. Nice seeing you. We used to come in and buy kippers.
Well, we still sell the kippers.
I'll have some kippers. I'll have some kippers. When I was in my early teens, I used to occasionally erect a soapbox. I had two soapboxes. One that I used to erect in Brixton Market and the other in Brixton Road. And I used to talk about political matters of the day, and everyone was very tolerant. Some people used to listen, some used to engage in badinage. Lots of other people smiled cheerfully and moved on. But it was a very good experience. Very nice to see you. How do you do?
You used to come to my shop, another shop recording. The record shop used to come to. Yes.
This is Cold Harbour Lane. All these old houses with the basements down there. And the Enterprise pub, which has been there for as long as I can recall. And here's Eastlake Road, and that's the house we lived in for many years. Behind there in Eastlake Road, we had a wicket pitched on the wall of the houses opposite and used to play cricket up against it for hours on end. I think it's a fallacy for people to think that because of my background and where I came from that I should be a socialist. Why should I be a socialist? It is people in that background who have actually suffered most from the fact that we've had a society in which the free enterprise system moved ahead and then was blocked as one moved over the years from conservative governments to socialist governments. When I was in my mid-teens, we moved to Burton Road. Where you see the house ahead with the two white arches, immediately opposite there, that is where we lived. Now, is it still there? It is. It is. It's still there. It's still there. It's hardly changed. We lived in the downstairs flat. There was an area below ground and ground floor. And I think there was a room or so on the first floor, but not the second. The second was occupied by other people. And it was a huge improvement on Cold Harbour Lane. It was a great step up. I was unemployed, and I remember vividly what it was like to spend your mornings looking for a job, often vainly, and your afternoons wondering what would happen the next day. There is only one cure for unemployment. There's only one way to put people back in permanent, secure, sustainable jobs that they can be confident in. And that is to have the right economic framework to produce steady, sustainable, continuing growth in the economy. That takes time. It can be unpopular while you do it. It is difficult while you do it. It can't be done with short-term stimulations of the economy. It can only be done by bringing inflation down and keeping it down so that people know it won't move. The first ingredient has to be a competitive tax structure. Low taxes give people the opportunity to invest, to provide for their own family, and create a cycle of growth. You cannot lift yourself out of recession with high taxes. That perpetuates recession. Over there is St. Matthew's Church. That's where Norma and I were married in 1970. And beyond it is Lambeth Town Hall, where I was a councillor from 1968 onwards, and practically lived for 3 years. I wouldn't have missed the few years I was a Lambeth councillor for anything. It was one of the best learning schools in politics, and I think in life as well, that one could possibly have. You had almost every sort of problem to examine. People with all sorts of ambitions, some of which could be realised, some of which couldn't. You had a population mix of a most extraordinary kind, a large number of people in very great difficulty often. Where do you all live, locally? People are entitled to their own views, to their own instincts, to their own beliefs. And it is quite wrong to try and pigeonhole everybody into the same beliefs that the majority of people hold. Firstly, it cannot be done because individuality is there and it cannot be changed, and you should not try and change it. But secondly, if you tried to do it, you'd have a very intolerant, very unpleasant, very autocratic society, and not the sort of society I would wish to see. People are individuals, they have their own instincts, they have their own feelings. As a matter of privacy, that is a matter, I think, predominantly for them. I think every family has their own experiences of the NHS and will draw upon it. That's certainly true in my case. In their later years, both my parents were ill. They needed protracted medical treatment, both in hospital from time to time and also direct through their general practitioners. And they got it. Excellent treatment. Treatment that we couldn't possibly have provided for ourselves. And I saw then, at a young age and at very close quarters, the peace of mind that the availability of that treatment actually provided to my parents and to the rest of my family. I want to make sure that's there for everyone else. The Patient's Charter attempts to make sure that the excellent medical service is also provided as a personal service with the greatest possible dignity. I'm pretty clear in my mind what every parent wants for their own children. They want them as a basic to learn to read, to learn to write, to learn to add up, and to do that easily and readily as a matter of course. That is what we are determined to ensure is provided in the schools. And above all, that people have the sort of education that will prepare them for the changing world in which they're going to work for the rest of their lives. Nothing will be the same again. This world is becoming more competitive and changing at a more rapid rate than any before. In future, people won't leave school with one career in mind, one qualification, and stay at that through the rest of their life. They'll need to be trained, they'll need to be retrained, and then perhaps retrained again. It will be a consistent learning process through life. And without those basics, people simply won't be equipped to undertake that changing learning process. First time I came to the House of Commons as a Member of Parliament was in 1979. And I remember very clearly the excitement there was at that stage. Every time I go in it, I still get a thrill. I'm not remotely blasé about being part of the House of Commons. The atmosphere that it generates, the authority that it has, the extent to which people turn to the House of Commons when there are really serious problems, and that atmosphere pervades the whole place. There are many advantages in politics. It's very exciting, it's very worthwhile. You may, if you're lucky, have the opportunity to do something that really matters. I think my background is an asset, not a disadvantage. That's how I've always found it. I think the principal point about making policy is that it is made up of two components. Firstly, intellectual conviction. You have to believe in what you're doing. But secondly, I think it is personal experience. If you've done something, or seen it, or been it, or felt it, then you can understand what it means, and you can understand how it affects other people in their own individual lives.
someone really cares. Guess who? Something in your heart. Oh, this surely you see. Oh, that the someone who really cares is me. Someone will wait eternally. Someone who wants your love so desperately. Someone who really cares, who really cares is me.
I say this, that the government that will react to children's pain in the way that they did is unfit to govern.
They're young, they're dynamic, they're imaginative. They want to get the country moving again.
All together now, together, all together now, 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 all together now.
Time for our country to start pulling together. Pulling together for the sake of the pensioners. Pulling together to give the youngsters a chance. Pulling together against the waste and the cost of unemployment. Now is the time to make our country safer, cleaner, more secure. Now is the time to make our country stronger and more successful. Now is the time for Britain to pull together. Now is the time for change. Now is the time for Labour.
I hope in the next few years that we will carry on with much of the work that has been done in the last few years. In particular, I want to see us build a country that is at ease with itself. I will fight for my belief, and my belief is a return to basics in education.
We visited a hospital together, and it's a great event, a Prime Minister visiting a hospital. And what's so remarkable is John Major's ability to put people at their ease, to make them feel he understands, to touch people. He knows what it's all about.
Thank you very much for what you've done over the last few months. It's been an absolutely fabulous job.
People said that he was a rookie prime minister who wouldn't be able to tackle the international side of things. Well, look, Gulf War, Kurds, Maastricht, extraordinary piece of negotiating skill, calm and courteous, but tough as old boots as well.
I saw it firsthand, the courage and resolution of John Major in the most immediate way, because at the very start of the Gulf War Cabinet met, and at that moment a mortar bomb landed 10 yards outside the Cabinet room, and the windows were shattered, there was smoke in the room, the smell of explosive. I was incredibly impressed by the determination and resolution he showed. He just said, when do we go to another room?
We had a fairly rough second day of the summit at Maastricht in December, because John had, I suppose, 40, perhaps more points that Britain had to insist on. And the other countries had maybe 4 or 5 each. I remember one in particular at the end, which needed everyone to agree to. And everyone agreed, went round the table. Finally, Britain, and John said, no, I don't agree. Chancellor Cole laughed at his bravery in doing this. We won the point, and afterwards another big delegation said, thank God you did that. We didn't quite have the nerve to say that.
I remember him once pushing a piece of paper across to me. It said, do you want to come to Stamford Bridge on Sunday? So I passed it back, wrote on it, yes, but who's playing? So he sent it back, he'd just written on the top, if you don't know, you can't come.
During the summer, Mr. President, I did quite a bit of travelling. Headingley, Edgbaston. I've got it. I like it. And with your help, I'm going to keep it.
It's never any effort for him to talk to anyone, not in a sort of, I better do this because that's what politicians are supposed to do kind of way, but just out of a natural interest in people.
What we want is a better Britain, a country which is strong in the world, a country where the individual counts, a country of real opportunity where every one of her people is free to choose, a country with a head and a country with a heart. And on April the 9th, I have no doubt, it is for our kind of Britain that the people of Britain will make their choice.
Right, so who's first today, Minnie?
Sir Rupert Wolfleby, sir.
Show in, show in. Hello, Rupert. Rupert, nice to see you, old man. Sit down, take the weight off your wallet. Don't believe you know my colleague, Rupert Dodge. He's very much our specialist in, what do we call it again?
Corporate revenue advance planning.
Tax dodging. Ish. So, how's business, Rupert?
Business is bloody marvellous, Rupert, and that's just the problem. You see, my client,
the Sheikh,
is a mite worried that because of all the billions the Abu Gidi Oil Corporation is making in Britain,
there arises a small matter of corporation tax in the order of...
a couple of billion.
And the Sheikh's not too keen to stump up.
Not over keen.
Over to you, Rupert.
Thanks, Rupert. Well, I don't see any great problem here. It's a clear case of sovereign immunity for companies acting under the umbrella of national government, etc. I think we could wangle a complete exemption.
You mean he won't have to pay a single penny in tax?
Correct.
Nothing?
I told you he was good. Quick pint before you go?
Well, just a half, perhaps.
Lord Rupert Shuffington Crag, sir.
Rupert! Brandy and soda?
Good God, no, it's too early in the day for soda.
Sit down, sit down, sit down. Now, as I recall, your problem is the little matter of your death.
How to leave the entire county and associated businesses to Lord Rupert the Younger without those nasty little taxmen getting involved. Any ideas?
Can't see a problem, Rupert. Just bundle up the capital gains tax and the inheritance tax into one parcel and you get double tax relief. You just leave it all to me.
Just leave it all to us.
Double tax relief? I don't believe it. Just imagine.
The dear seems to have died.
Smart move.
Yes. After all, don't want to wait until those Labour people get in.
Mr. Rupert Chalkstripe, sir.
Cheesy chalk stripe, well, blow me. We were in the same dorm together at school.
Blow me indeed.
So, what's up, old son?
Trouble at mill, Rupert. Trouble at mill.
Really? Last I heard, Allied starch and carbohydrates were making a pretty packet this year.
Yes, precisely the problem, old fruit. The speculators were expecting to make a right killing.
And this brings in...
the dread spectre.
Of advanced corporation tax.
Correct, leading to a certain amount of...
rancor.
Yes, I'm glad you said that.
Any ideas, Rupert?
Oh, easy one. There's just issue enhanced shares instead of dividends, and you can get out of advanced corporation tax altogether.
Really? Well, go to it, old son. Let's all rock and roll.
Sir Rupert Rabbit, sir.
Sir Rupert! Delighted. Meet my colleague Rupert Dodge, Corporate Revenue Advanced Planning.
Ah, CRAP man, eh?
Sir Rupert, of course you know. Very much the patron saint of our industry.
Used to be a Tory cabinet minister, privatised British assets and Family Silver plc, and then by a strange quirk of fate was appointed chairman of the new company.
Now, steady on, old son. We all did it. Tebbit privatised BT and finished up with a seat on the board. Fowler did it with National Freight. Walker did it with gas. Wasn't just me.
Oh, no, of course it wasn't, sir. No one's blaming you in the least, are they, Rupert? So, what gives, sir?
I have heard a nasty little rumour.
The windfall levy on the £32 billion of excess profits. Yes, I'd heard that one. Rupert, any truth?
Not a chance. Unless, of course, a Labour government gets in.
Please.
Well, just time for another quick windfall from the cabinet, eh?
Bill Green.
Who? Funny name, eh, Rupert?
Certainly is, Rupert.
How can we help you, Mr. Green?
I'm running a small business, 50 people. We make electronic components. We're trying to break into the export business, but it's tough going. Well, VAT is up and national insurance contributions are going up. I just seem to be paying more taxes every time I turn around. Is there anything you can do for me?
Rupert?
No.
Sorry. Look, the government's got to raise revenue from somebody.
Somebody has to pay.
The government has decided.
It should be you.
And you. Yes, and you.
You too. Sorry. Gotta be done.
You.
And you. Oh, yes, and you.
Not forgetting you.
Oh, there's someone at the back. Yes, and you.
You're not exempt. And you. You're not one of us.
Got to be.
Election is the time to create better government, the opportunity to decide which party has the most effective programs and policies. The Natural Law Party is the only party with scientific and reliable solutions for every area of life. Natural law is the intelligence that guides the evolution of the whole universe. Natural law governs the galaxies, the solar system, all life on Earth, and certainly our own lives are governed by natural law. The practical programs of the Natural Law Party use the intelligence of nature to unfold the full potential of life of every person and the life of the nation. The most fundamental need today in the field of government is to create integration in collective consciousness and dissolve the high levels of stress in society. Without this, problems will continue to multiply. No solutions will work. The Natural Law Party will make this area its first priority. We have a systematic and scientifically tested program to create integration and coherence in the nation. The Natural Law Party will establish a group of 7,000 experts in transcendental meditation and yogic flying. When a person practices transcendental meditation and yogic flying, a high degree of integration is produced in brain activity. The person experiences bubbling bliss and stress is dissolved. This is the basis of many practical results in every area of life. Through a group of 7,000 experts in yogic flying, this effect of coherence radiates to the whole nation, bringing down stress and negativity in society and making the nation strong, dynamic, and integrated. Over 500 scientific studies have been conducted on the benefits of the programs of the Natural Law Party. Of these, over 40 have shown the benefits of creating coherence through a group of yogic flyers. For example, in this country, a group of yogic flyers has reduced the crime rate in Merseyside by 60% during the last 7 years compared to all the other metropolitan areas in the United Kingdom. Through this program of creating coherence in national consciousness, the Natural Law Party is the only party that can strengthen the sovereignty of the United Kingdom and at the same time create a real union of the European nations.
It is an honor to lead this party. I accept it with excitement, but also with humility, and with a profound sense of the responsibility that is placed upon me.
Radio 2, Jimmy Young. And in the studio with me now, the new leader of the Labour Party, Tony Blair. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Jim.
Tony Blair has a sense of vision. You know what they say about politicians, they never look you in the eye. He certainly does.
I feel I can trust him.
We've got to leave the politics of the past behind. We're not going to create a successful modern business economy unless we're going to invest in our industry and our people. That requires stability. It requires a government committed to investment and committed to people. And it also requires the recognition that we are not going to get where we need to be unless the public sector and the private sector actually work together.
I think he's a very good leader for us. I think he understands the problems. He's from another generation which understands the problems both in business and ordinary people.
Now, if we're going to rebuild our economy, we need to have the right partnership with industry, but we also need to recognize that you've got to rebuild this country as a strong society where people get opportunity, where they get the chance to get on in life, but where we demand responsibility in return.
The country needs a change, and it needs it absolutely as soon as possible.
We have to create an education system where the majority aren't failing and where every school is a decent school. And I want for the parents of this country what I want for my own children. Wouldn't it be more sensible, instead of spending millions of pounds on unemployment, on crime, on social decay, to be spending money on building for the future? On education, on giving our kids the chances they need, without which not merely will they not get the opportunities that they need to get on in life, but the country is poorer.
I think it's because he's got commitment and people feel he's a decent guy, and not least of all quite an active family man. These are things that strike a chord.
Somebody's not just making threats, but offering positive solutions.
Given a chance, he will put us back on safer streets.
We should be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. We need to have a criminal justice system, court system, that deals with those committing crimes, that punishes the criminal properly and sensibly, and gets over the situation now where only 1 in 50 crimes ever even leads to a conviction.
I can tell you this, he has a very clear commitment about what he wants to do. He is going to change this society.
The National Health Service, like any institution, needs reform and change. Of course it does. But it can't be run like a market enterprise. It's not. It's a public service.
I think the health service is hanging on by its fingernails.
in the hope that we will have an administration that really does believe in the founding principles of the NHS.
I want the bureaucrats out, and I want the money going to frontline public services that are going to deliver decent patient care.
He has vision, he has courage, and above all he offers hope.
It's middle income Britain that has been hit hardest by the tax rises of the past few years. And so far from penalising middle income Britain, I want the Labour Party to be helping those people.
I'm 66 years of age. I've been able to work all my life, and I would ask that they can get that back again for everybody that's here.
I'm not going to promise what I can't deliver, and I will say what I actually think. And no country becomes great through despair, through believing that nothing can be done. There is only one chance for the future for this country, and that is the politics of hope allied to hard-headed practical policy.
I am ready to serve. We are ready to serve. And together, we will make this a turning point. We can change the course of our history and build a new, confident land of opportunity in a new and changing world. That is our pledge to the people of this country.
If you would like to join the Labour Party,
they've been producing pork pies round these parts for as long as some people can remember. Big, juicy pork pies, loved by everyone. John Major's pork pies. How tempting they were. His first pork pie was that the people of Britain would pay less tax. What a pork pie that was. There have been 20 tax rises since 1993, meaning that a typical family pays an extra £800 a year. Then John Major said that under Tory leadership, life would be easier for homeowners. That was a pork pie too. 300,000 homes have been repossessed in the past 5 years, and 1 million families are lumbered with negative equity. By this time, John Major and his staff were producing more and more pork pies, even bigger and tastier than before. We were told that the streets were going to be safer. 1,000 extra police officers were promised. But there were 5 million crimes last year and fewer officers to solve them. They said people would be able to stand on their own 2 feet. But under John Major, the number of people on income support has grown by 1.5 million. They said parents would have more choice over their children's school. But more parents than ever before are being denied their first choice of school. They also produced a very popular, larger pork pie. They said we'd be better off under the Conservatives, and yet living standards are still falling. All in all, John Major, his staff, and of course all those that started the business all those years ago, have between them produced some truly outstanding pork pies.
We fight not for glory, nor wealth, nor honours, but only and alone we fight for freedom, which no good man surrenders, but with his life. So says the declaration of our growth, the declaration of those who protected and cherished an independent Scotland over 650 years ago. 24 years before those words were written, the Stone of Destiny had been stolen from Scotland. It was taken away to make us lose our desire for freedom. But Scotland would not give up. Scotland's patriots declared, for as long as 100 of us remain alive, we will yield in no way. That spirit kept Scotland independent for another 400 years. But we have not been free now for almost 3 centuries. And as the years have passed, we have paid a higher and higher price for this bankrupt and out-of-date union. With control of our own resources, Scotland would be the 8th richest nation in the industrialized world. And yet we are not permitted to decide on anything for ourselves. We have nearly 70% of Europe's crucial oil reserves, and yet we must stand outside the door when decisions are taken in Brussels. We produce more, save more, and export more than those south of the border, and yet we are told that we live off London taxes. We know that we have the skills, the wealth, and the determination to be free, and more of us are saying so. Now the growing pressure in Scotland for change has forced the government to do something. Not, of course, to do anything that gives us real power. The Tories will never do that, nor will Labour, but to make a gesture. That gesture is the return of the stone. In 10 days' time, we will welcome it back. The SNP are holding a torchlight rally in Edinburgh the night before it comes home, and you can come and join us. But we will not just be welcoming the stone. We will be asking for more. For the return of the stone is the result of pressure from Scotland for change. London is worried about the mood of Scotland and the overwhelming desire for a parliament. London is beginning to hear us and to pay attention. But the return of the stone is only a beginning. We need more than symbols in Scotland. We need real power and a real parliament. We need a real parliament that can use our resources to build this country anew. We need a real parliament to represent the real Scotland. We need independence. It is independence that will allow us to make our own decisions about our own future. And it is independence that will give us the confidence to take responsibility for those decisions. We already pay our way in the world. Now we must speak for ourselves as well. We need the substance, not just the symbols. We need more. Things are changing in Scotland. After nearly 7 centuries at Westminster, the stone is coming home. And after more than 650 years, the words of the Declaration of Arbroath are coming true. For freedom is the most important thing. Freedom from poverty, from unemployment, from homelessness, from the threat of nuclear weapons. And those modern freedoms can only come with our freedom, with freedom for the ancient nation of Scotland. We can build on the stone. We can win our freedom. We can be, we must be, a nation again.
Now the lowest of any major European...
There are signs that the feel-good factor's coming back.
Some people saw their incomes grow this month as the effect of budget tax cuts came through.
Independent experts are saying that Britain now has the fastest growing major economy in Europe. But just as things are looking up, new dangers threaten our success. And the worst thing about these new dangers is that they come from somewhere you might think is perfectly safe. New Labour, new danger. With old Labour, at least you knew where you were. But New Labour is dangerous because it feels safe. Just as you've got some extra cash coming in, New Labour threatened to take it away again. In their manifesto document, launched last week, their plans for the economy would inevitably lead to new taxes. New Labour means new taxes. So if you think Labour will win, start saving. New Labour, new danger. Our unemployment is now lower than in every major country in Europe. But would your job be secure under New Labour? In their new manifesto, Labour insists they bring in the minimum wage and the social chapter from Europe. It sounds good, but what it would do is drive up unemployment. An awful lot of people could lose their jobs. New Labour. New danger. Strikes are now at the lowest level for 100 years. But do you remember the bad old days of industrial unrest? They pretty well ruined the country. Well, with New Labour, they'd be back, because the unions still have half the votes that control New Labour policy. They'd make it harder to get rid of strikers and force businesses to accept new union bargaining powers. New Labour, new danger. Mortgage rates are now lower than at any time for 30 years. But if you still think New Labour would make little difference, financial experts wouldn't agree. They say that interest rates would go up. And that means higher mortgages. Well, you could always move to a smaller house. New Labour, new danger. But at least some people would welcome a new Labour government. Career criminals. The Conservatives are introducing guaranteed stiff prison sentences for repeat offenders. But New Labour would allow persistent armed robbers, burglars and drug dealers to get away with softer sentences. New Labour's manifesto says they'd be tough on the causes of crime. But that's a bit hard to believe if they're going to keep letting them out. New Labour, new danger. And have you read what New Labour's manifesto says about the Constitution? Its parliaments in Scotland and Wales sound nice enough, but what they mean is the breakup of the United Kingdom. And as if that wasn't enough, New Labour would give up Britain's veto in Europe. In other words, they'd steadily give away control of our country. New Labour means new danger. New taxes, new job losses, new strikes, new mortgage rises, new lighter sentences, and the breakup of the United Kingdom. New Labour, new danger.
Family doctors have condemned the Labour government's decision to abolish GP fund holding. But union leaders welcome the move. In a statement today, they said,
John Prescott has resigned from the Cabinet.
Britain was plunged into constitutional crisis today as the Scottish Parliament refused to back down in its standoff with Westminster over tax, spending and voting rights. The Parliament threatened to begin moves to take Scotland out of the United Kingdom unless Westminster backed down within 100 days.
Tony Blair finally lost his battle with left-wing MPs today as he agreed to their demands to repeal all Conservative anti-strike laws. The 50 rebel MPs, led by Labour's deputy leader John Prescott, now outside the Cabinet, had threatened to bring down the Labour government unless he agreed to all their demands.
Inflation's up again to its highest level.
The car giants blamed their decision to close the plant, at a cost of 5,000 jobs, on spiralling costs following the Labour government's introduction of new regulations under the European Social Chapter.
Violent crime rose sharply over the last 3 months, but the Labour government again ruled out implementing the former government's law on minimum sentences for violent criminals. Opposition leader...
The influential OECD has revised its forecast for Britain's economy. It predicted that next year Britain would face a slowdown in growth and that unemployment would continue to rise.
New budget, new taxes. In his second official budget today, Chancellor Gordon Brown announced a further increase in income tax.
Higher mortgages are on the way.
Tax increases.
Sharp rise in interest rates.
Constitutional crisis.
Growing economic instability.
Transport strikes. The end to the job losses.
New taxes. London tax.
Britain is the strongest major economy in Europe. The fastest growth, the lowest taxes, and the lowest unemployment. According to the independent IMF,
recent economic performance has been enviable. Since 1992, output growth has rebounded, unemployment declined markedly, and inflation been brought to the lowest levels in a generation.
the OECD said recently,
the United Kingdom's policy has paid off in better jobs and an unemployment record better than in many of the continental European countries.
The French newspaper Le Figaro stated,
the famous flexibility of the British labour market is not a myth. The country holds the European record for the lowest number of strikes.
According to the London Business School,
in terms of growth, the UK stands out as the brightest of the major European economies at present.
Last month, Goldman Sachs were quoted as saying,
the housing market is strengthening. Household real income growth is strong. Mortgage rates are close to the lowest level for 30 years.
The chairman of BMW said,
Great Britain is currently the most attractive country among all European locations for producing cars.
The chairman of BASF, a leading German manufacturer.
It makes perfect sense to invest in Britain. It is the best place in Europe.
Other European countries have more high-spending, high-taxing systems than conservative Britain. They follow the Euro-social model. The average tax level in Europe is 41%. In Britain, it's 35%. The average unemployment of major European countries is over 3 million and rising. But here in Britain, it's under 2 million and falling. In Europe, the average number of strike days a year is over 2.5 million. In Britain, it's nearly half that, the lowest levels for 100 years. We can all take pride in what we've achieved. But, just as Britain's doing better than Europe, Labour want to follow their system. New Labour would copy Euro-social policies. New Labour would give up Britain's veto in social and industrial policy and sign the social chapter. So our economy would become more like other European countries. If Labour copied these Euro policies, Britain's taxes, strikes and unemployment would move towards the Euro average. And if Britain ended up with the same level of tax as the Euro average, the average British household would pay £2,300 extra tax a year. And if we had the same level of strikes as the Euro average, we'd suffer over 2 million more strike days a year. And if our unemployment went up to the average of the major European countries, there'd be 1.5 million more British people on the dole. New Labour, Euro taxes, Euro strikes, Euro job losses.
I've got a problem, and I need your advice. It's all right. It's not psychiatric. Actually, it's not really my problem. It's something that's puzzling the Liberal Democrats. But as I am a Lib Dem, I'm puzzled too. It's a strange kind of problem. It's nothing to do with the party. That's doing well, going from strength to strength. And nothing to do with Paddy Ashdown, because you trust him. And it's nothing to do with our policies either, because you say you agree with them. For example, Paddy has promised to invest £2 billion in education, and if there is no other way to pay for it, to put a penny on the income tax. Now, people seem to like that. They know that if we slip further behind in education, we'll never be able to compete in the modern world. And people like our policies on protecting the health service, looking after the environment, and, of course, reforming government, you know, making it more open and cleaning up the sleaze. So, no problem there. No, the problem comes because you like our policies. Yes. Well, here it is. The polls show that half of you, 1 of every 2 people watching this now, would vote for the Liberal Democrats if you thought we could win. I'll just say that again. Half of you prefer Lib Dem policies and would vote for us if you thought we could win. Now, do you see the problem? Because, of course, that means that if you did vote for us, we would win, right? I mean, not just do well, but actually win. In fact, half the votes would give us the biggest landslide this century. We should be so lucky. So, look, when you say that you'd vote for us if we could win, I mean, I'm not being rude or anything, but what do you mean exactly? I mean, is the problem that you don't think Lib Dems have enough experience of running things? Because, well, I don't think so. Not while we're running far more local authorities than the Tories, and have lots more councillors too, and are already responsible for managing billions of pounds of public money, blah, blah, blah. You know, my mother said, perhaps people don't want fresh faces at Westminster. But I think she was being funny. Which brings us back to our problem, really. You like our leader and our policies, we have experience, and you'd vote for us if, etc., etc., etc. Well, I can't solve it, so I'm going to ask you for your help. Will you please write down on a postcard what you think we should say to get across to people that they can do what they'd really like to do? Okay? So, while you're doing that, here's some light music. Thank you.
As Britain approaches the end of the century, we have been with the same masters now for 18 years. We still have the talent, skills, and inventiveness that we've always had, probably more so. But in a rapidly changing world, we seem somehow to have lost our sense of purpose. Now, someone has emerged who is determined to give it back to us. He is the most talked about politician of his generation. They've called him everything, from Bambi to Union Basher, from public opinion quarter to autocrat. But one thing is undeniable. In 3 short years, his energy and leadership have transformed his party. What can he do for Britain?
Look, the Tories didn't get everything wrong in the 80s. I mean, let's just be honest about that, admit it. But Britain can be better. We can make this country better than it is. The Tories today are no longer the party of low taxes. The fact is, they broke their word on tax. They raised taxes 22 times. Ordinary families have had massive tax rises under the Conservatives, the largest in peacetime history. Now, I don't want to add to the burden of those families. They're hard-working. I'd like to see them get their tax burden down. That's why we've said that we're not going to raise the basic or top rate of income tax. Ask yourself this question. These Tories get back in for another 5 years. Will we even have a National Health Service in the way that we've known it and grown up with it? Now, we've got to rebuild the National Health Service. And as a start, we will spend £100 million by cutting that bureaucracy and putting it into cutting waiting lists. Why should people in this country have to put up with these levels of crime? The fear, the abuse, the hassle. Elderly people often afraid to go out of their own homes, sometimes afraid to be in their own homes. The Labour Party will take on this issue in every single aspect of it. Tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. I'm a British patriot, and I want the best out of Europe for Britain. And we need a government that is going to lead in Europe, shape Europe, not just follow along behind a Europe that's being shaped by others. And a divided Conservative Party with weak leadership, fighting itself, cannot fight for Britain. Education is the future for this country. If we don't give our kids the right education, they don't succeed, Britain doesn't succeed. That's why I've said, for a Labour government, its top 3 priorities: education, education, education. And again, we can make a start. For example, by reducing class sizes for all 5, 6 and 7-year-olds in our primary schools to 30 or under. That we will do in the 5 years of a Labour government. Britain can be better. We can make this country better than it is. And I am not going to promise anything that I can't deliver. But I do tell you that today's Labour Party, transformed as it is, with the strength of leadership and the strength of unity behind it, can make this country better.
After 18 years of weak leadership, incompetence, and broken promises, Britain deserves better. Give Tony Blair your mandate on May the 1st, and let him give Britain back its sense of purpose.
Oh, yes, it is. I'll do it, yes. I promise I'll really do it. I promise I'll really do it. Sure. It'll be like this under the Tories. No, it'll be No, we'll do it first. No, we'll do it first. No, we'll make life better. No, we'll make life better. Pay less with us.
Same old story. Already, this election has shown the Tories at their worst, and Labour following them. They attack each other endlessly. They make all kinds of promises they know they can't keep. But if they stopped shouting and started listening, they'd see that people want something different.
From the dawn of humankind, people and nations have fought good against evil, right against wrong. Have fought against injustice and prejudice and persecution. But perhaps the greatest fight of all has been the fight against fear. Fear that eats the soul of every human being, no matter where or when. The fear of poverty, the fear of failure, the fear of being left on a scrap heap unloved and unwanted. Left without even a voice that can be heard. Left without dignity. And as we reach the birth of a new century, we look out onto this violent, greedy and corrupt world and wonder where we are and what we can do, for we feel we have lost control. But those of us who live in Scotland have a choice, for we can stand up as a people and say stop. We have a natural humanity and common sense. We have industry, ingenuity and a sense of humour that are surely worth something. We want democracy, not division. Cooperation, not aggression. Acceptance, not prejudice. Love, not fear. There is a spirit growing in Scotland that wants responsibility for creating and believing in our future. There is a wish to unite in a new spirit of love and maybe make a difference, not just to our lives, but by example to the lives of others. We can change the world we live in. All it takes is courage. The courage to say yes to a parliament of our own in an independent Scotland. Given control of our own resources, that Scotland would be the 8th richest country in the world. A Scotland in which could thrive a society that has humanity and compassion at its heart. Where the belief is in social justice for all. A society where we will banish the weapons of mass destruction that sit on our lofts. A society in which we will never allow poverty or homelessness for any of our people. A society free of prejudice against race or sex or belief. A society which can give voice to our frustrations and a shape to our dreams. We are a mature, intelligent, hard-working and honourable people, and we want truth back in our lives. We want to be part of a society that we are proud of, that reflects who we are and what we are about, and the values by which we lead our lives. A world we can all feel important in. A future we can all believe in, and our children can grow in, free from fear and violence. Free to grow as individuals without prejudice. Free to grow in an age of hope and potential. That kind of future can be created by our choice. We can wrap ourselves in a blanket of fear, or we can embrace our inherent goodness and find purpose in who we are. Can we make a difference? We have the strength. We have the talent. We have the wealth. Can we find the courage? Looking on the face of a child, the innocence, the hope, the capacity for love. We know in our hearts there is only one answer. Yes, we can.
What I admire him for, when we were out walks or we had to go any place, he helped me a lot, you know, with the other kids. Real, proper wee boy, but still very lovable, very, very caring.
I first met Paddy on the summer canoeist course to join the Special Boat Service in 1963. On completion of the course itself, some passed and some failed. He was the top of probably one of the hardest courses military services. So there again, it just goes to show the calibre of the man.
Paddy joined us on the Silver Harvester for, I think it was 3 days. I think we were all very impressed with the way he worked with the rest of the crew. It was March, it was cold, and he was on deck virtually all the time, as far as I recall.
He, to me, is still like a son, really. I reared him sort of like a son, but he was sort of special because he was the eldest, and he was very, very helpful and very, very good. A good boy.
I found that Paddy was the type of man that he wouldn't expect anyone to do anything that he couldn't do himself. And as I say, if it was a nasty job, he'd volunteer to do it anyway.
He was prepared to do everything, and he did everything. He was down in the fish room, he gutted the fish, cleaned the decks, he made the tea. He didn't rest.
It never dawned on me that he would have been a politician. But he showed leadership even then.
I'm certain he has these qualities of leadership, because the ability to work within the team is as essential as being able to head a team. He showed this very well by fitting in very easily with the team on board into what is potentially a very lethal environment.
Jungle warfare is a very nerve-wracking experience. It's all quietness and silence, and it does play on nerves. The man was a natural soldier. There's no gung-ho or anything like this. Although we carried on and done the task we were given, there's no way he would put men's lives at risk.
I think in the army, it either makes you or breaks you. Well, it didn't break him. But I think if he hadn't been brave then, he wouldn't have got through it. Would it be true to oneself? Well, that applies to him, really.
Another thing that struck me was that after 3 days on a trawler, you would expect the mast to slip a little bit. But it didn't. He was the same man after 3 days as the man who came on board in Padstow Bay.
Well, he listened to other people's points of views, but he treats everybody equal. And that's the way it should be. Do you know many politicians would do anything like that? I don't.
I think he's a natural, actually. Not only that, he's a man of the people. He's got plenty of common sense, which is lacking in a lot of politicians. People get stuck in Parliament and they tend to lose contact with the normal person. I think Paddy's the type of man who would still not forget that once upon a time that he was down there, he was one of the men, and he's worked with the men.
And I went up to meet him, and the car came along, and he got out. And to me, that was that same wee boy with the hair the colour of ripe corn, you know. And he hugged me, and I hugged him, and we cried, really, you know. It was lovely. You know, he's never forgot about me. It's not because I know him and love him, but if he couldn't keep a promise, I don't think he would make it.
I've been very fortunate. I've got great friends. I've got a superb family, and I've had some pretty wide experiences, actually rather more outside politics than inside. I was even unemployed for a while. Our first grandchild will be born any day now, and that's made me think even harder about what I want for the future for all our children. Good health, that's vital, and so is a decent environment, but above all, the best education in the world. Now that's the key. Changing Britain is a massive task, but this is the best country in the world. I care very much about what needs to be done to make a better life for all our children, and I am very determined to do something about it. Determined to make that difference.
Yeah, I'm proud of him, really. Really proud of him.
If you'd said to me at sort of 18, 19, you're going to be a politician, I would have said, forget it. Anything else, anything but being a politician.
Why? On what grounds? Why?
Because I thought politicians were complete pains in the backside. You okay? And there is a part of you that constantly wonders whether it is worth staying in politics because of all the rubbish that you have to do. I mean, you just have to do it. You've just got to keep a grip of yourself and hope that your humanity sees you through and in the end, understand why you want to be in it. What I keep saying to people is get behind the image. It's quite difficult to bring people to actually see the type of person you are. My ambition when I was a child was to play football for Newcastle United. That was my greatest ambition. I kept trying to talk my dad into using whatever meagre influence he had with Newcastle United to get me a trial. He never did. Because my dad was very active. I mean, he was active in Tory politics, actually, locally. In fact, they had him lined up to fight a seat and become a member of Parliament, but then he became very ill, so gave up everything. But we discussed it, and then when I started really being Labour, there was a slight problem for a time, but he never really objected to it. And of course, he's come over to the Labour Party now, so it's all fine. I think my generation is trying to get to a different type of politics, which is rooted in strong values and convictions, but it's not quite left and right in the way that it's been before. I just think that for a whole generation of people, they thought that if they arrived and did well, then you became a Tory. You know, it's like people used to say, well, if you bought your house, if you owned your own home, you were a Tory, which is crazy. So I've always understood, because of Dad, why some people who'd done very well, who'd come up in life and made it on their own, felt the Tory party was the party that was for them because it was the party of ambition and aspiration.
Right. And
that the Labour Party somehow wasn't. And I think, to an extent, I mean, that's what the Labour Party became. It became too stuck in the past, too rooted in saying, well, that's where you are, that's where you stay. Whereas I think today the position's changed around. What I've always wanted with today's Labour Party is to be the party of aspiration, but say, you know, you can have a society where there's ambition without a lack of compassion. And
yeah, I was going to say, so why aren't you a Tory?
Because I think that in the end, you actually fulfil your ambition. I think you fulfil your ambitions better in a society where people have some sense of duty towards other people. Homework? Well, you have a lot of that under Labour. You wait till David Blunkett gets hold of you. He'll be doing a lot of homework. The kids, they keep you grounded because you're seeing all through them and through their friends, you know, what's actually happening. I was thinking I wanted you to burst into song. And all the time you just go back to understanding why you're there, why you want to be in it. When he's on the stage, he's got... There's a sense in which I just feel people have got to understand things can change. I mean, it's just so daft to think they couldn't be better. I mean, they could be better. You could, if you decided on it, even if you just decided, right, the education system, let's say education and welfare were going to be the only things you worried about, and everything else stayed the same even.
Ask me my 3 main priorities for government, and I tell you, education, education, and education.
Well, the job of being a politician is to change the country in the way that you think is right for the country. I mean, there's no point in being in it unless you want to change things. If all you want to do is do the job, you want to sit in the office behind the desk, sign the papers, there's not much point in doing it. But it's like anything, you know, it's like what we did with the Labour Party. We had a clear series of objectives to modernise the Labour Party, bring it up to date, and we've got to do the same with the country. And it can be done. So when I say education, 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 what that means is not just all the specifics of policy. It means I am going to put every single bit of drive and energy that I've got into changing the education system of this country. For me, education, it's almost like trade union reform was for Margaret Thatcher. For me, education is the big passion. It's the thing that, you know, should drive everything that we're doing, which is one of the reasons why it's so crazy that today we spend more on unemployment than we do on education.
If a family's got people in the home and no one's working, how do the kids grow up with any sense of the work ethic, any sense of turning up to work on time, earning a wage? You know, they start living in a different culture, in a different society. And when that actually happens, then all the other problems come with it. All the crime and the drugs and the benefits bills. And when I talk about getting young people off benefit and into work, it's not I'm not saying they're being uncaring. On the contrary, the only proper, true, compassionate way to care is to say we're going to do something about that.
As a first step, we will implement a program to take 250,000 young people off benefit and into work, funded by a one-off windfall levy on the excess profits of the privatised monopoly utilities.
You say there's a great new Labour Party, it's going to change the world, but, you know, they're just cynical. People are cynical about politics and politicians because they've had a government for, at least for the past few years, that has kept promising things, never delivered them, that has havered on one thing and another thing. And people have almost got to the point where they say, well, what's the use? You're all the same, you know, nothing's ever going to make any difference. And of course, the Tories, in a sense, delight in that, because then people say, well, we might as well just stick with what we've got. But you don't have to stick with what you've got. You know, it's absurd to say that we cannot be better than this.
I want you to tell that Stephen Dorrell, from me, that he's got the National Health Service all wrong. I was in a fortnight, they had no pillows, my daughters had to bring my own pillows, my own blankets, they run out of drugs, and they came to take my blood pressure and they hadn't got one that was working. The nurses and the doctors are doing a hard job.
There is a battle for resources in the National Health Service, because we're spending so much money now on increased administration. But it's more than just about the resources in the health service.
Oh, he hurt his leg too. Did his sister do it?
What's really happened is that the Conservatives don't understand why we created the health service. They don't understand it. The health service, to me, is a living, breathing symbol of what a decent, civilized society should mean in practice. Helping people on the basis of their need, not on the basis of their wealth.
And, you know, if they can contribute to the feeding with access.
When my father became ill when I was 10, 11, and he had a stroke, and all our lives changed after that, really. Well, for the first 24 hours, we weren't sure whether he was going to live or not, so then that was okay, but then when he came back home, he really couldn't do anything, which was very tough for him because he was a public speaker. He was a good public speaker, he was a barrister, he was a good public speaker. So all those things had to stop. He had to give up his political ambitions, and everything changed. Yeah, well, it was I mean, the amazing thing is he did actually rebuild his life. And my mother, of course, she nursed him for 3 years, and taught him how to speak again. And I think when my mother died when I was 21, I think you got a sense of urgency into your life as a result of that. I mean, do you know what I mean? You suddenly thought, look, it's actually quite a short time you've got, so you better get on, you better get things done, you better do things.
And to talk like me, be an angel too.
We must awaken and ignite in our people the hope that change can bring. Because the last weapon the Tories have, you know their final weapon? It's despair and cynicism. It's telling people, well, it doesn't matter who's in power because they're all the same. It'll make no difference. Nothing can ever change. Rubbish. Of course things can change. When they say don't let Labour ruin it, I say to them Britain can be better than this.
Can only get better. Can only get...
You see, I couldn't imagine myself actually sitting in Downing Street, let's say, doing the job, having those things going on out there, and not be just like some sort of great galvanizing force driving through the change to make things better. I couldn't imagine doing it.
Can it possibly be true that the only democratic party advocating British independence is the UK Independence Party?
That's correct. The other mainstream parties want further integration. We believe, however, that the only way forward for Britain is to withdraw from the European Union. To do that, we need a majority of UKIP members of Parliament with a full range of policies to regenerate Britain. We already have these policies. We are not a one-issue party, but a potential party of government ready and willing to fight for as long as it takes to establish a free British democracy, trading freely with the world at large, founded on the rule of law, with a parliament fully accountable to the British people and to the British people alone.
Thank you, Dr. Sked. I, for one, was most impressed. No doubt you were as well.
Yes, that's right. The Liberal Party, not the Liberal Democrats. No, we're the Liberal Party, and we'd like to give you an insight into some of our policies. But first, a warning. We're not a party of the centre of British politics, the dead centre, as we will call it. Instead, we're a party of radical ideas. We've a long heritage of ideas. The NHS was one of our ideas 50 years ago. 2 years ago, at the European elections, we put forward our radical ideas on a Commonwealth of Europe rather than the Maastricht Treaty, and this gained us 100,000 votes. And we also have scores of local councillors. But tonight, time is short, so we'll look at our three key areas, our 3 Ps of policy: peace, people, and the planet.
There's been a lot of controversy recently about landmines, and we favour a worldwide ban on them, whether made in China, Russia, or here in Britain. Indeed, Liberals would go further still and end the international arms trade. Surely we can transfer the skill and technology to peaceful, beneficial use. While scrapping Britain's nuclear weapons, we'd still maintain strong, well-equipped forces to defend our interests. We're in favour of mediation and non-military solutions to conflict, based on a revitalised United Nations, and see worldwide democracy as our goal. And just think of the money we'll save. How about investing it in health and education? So, in summary, Liberals would end the arms trade, scrap nuclear weapons, promote mediation, and use the savings on health and education.
But what do Liberal policies mean for people? Let's look at our second P. Well, let's quickly talk about what we don't want. We certainly don't want identity cards, and believe that their introduction would be a dangerous infringement of personal liberty. What we most certainly do want for the people of this country is a Bill of Rights. It's a basic premise of the Liberals that we put freedom first, and as such we feel a Bill of Rights is long overdue in a so-called free country. Now freedom's fine, but not if you're penniless. So, without any interference from Brussels, Liberals propose a minimum wage of £4.26 per hour to restore some dignity to the lowest paid. And what about the other things that people care about? The health service, for starters. It's clear that the artificial internal market isn't working, no more than the bureaucratic old authorities. What's needed is a radical new approach. Liberals propose that hospitals be controlled by democratically elected representatives of the communities they serve. So, the Liberal Party would oppose identity cards, favour a Bill of Rights, let local people control their health service.
Liberals recognise the need for an efficient transport system, including the reopening of 700 miles of railway to serve an extra 3 million of our population. What's more, Liberals propose free, yes, free local public transport. Now that's radical for you. So we're all for long-term thinking on our stewardship of the planet. Just to recap then, Liberals oppose atomic power and favour alternatives, favour free public transport and a European pollution police force.
Peace, people and the planet, the 3 Ps of Liberal policy. But how does the Liberal Party compare with the other parties, especially the other 3? Well, we'd scrap nuclear weapons and spend the money on schools and hospitals. The others wouldn't. We'd allow local people to control their own health service. The others wouldn't. We'd oppose identity cards as a threat to liberty. The others wouldn't. And what about Europe? A big issue. We favour a Commonwealth. The others broadly agree with Maastricht. I hope we've said enough to prove that we're a party of radical ideas, not the dead centre, but we've a whole range of other ideas, from animal rights to homelessness, and from crime to the very way in which we're governed.
I know why we lost. I think you do too. Our parliamentary party came to be seen as divided, arrogant, selfish, and conceited. Our party as a whole was regarded as out of touch and irrelevant. So we need to change some of our attitudes, change our organization, change our culture. We have to welcome new people and new ideas. I'm going to tell you what I believe in. First of all, I believe in freedom. I learnt all about freedom while growing up in South Yorkshire. I'm not one of those politicians who looks at the United Kingdom through a pair of binoculars from inside the M25. And I believe in enterprise. I learnt about enterprise firsthand from my own family. We've never been rich, but we have been comfortable. And I knew from an early age what that comfort depended on. Diligence, enterprise, initiative, sound business practice, dedication, hard work. The same values that were the foundation of my family's business helped launch millions of similar small businesses under Conservative governments. I believe that one of the first duties of government is to provide a good system of state education. I went to a good school, a comprehensive school. Friends of mine whose parents were desperate to send them to the same school, but who lived in the wrong street on the wrong part of the map, were just unlucky. They were given no choice. So I believe in education, and I believe in self-reliance. We all want to provide for ourselves and our families. That's not greed, it's not selfishness, it's the most ancient human instinct of all. And I believe in obligations to others. And Conservatives know that true compassion is measured not in gestures or slogans, but in hours of personal commitment and voluntary action. Of all the jobs I've had in government, the one that has meant the most to me is serving as the Minister for Disabled People. The courage and self-confidence of the disabled people I met is a lasting inspiration to me. I want everyone to understand this. Compassion is not a bolt-on extra to conservatism. It is at its very core. And I believe in our nation. So I have to tell you, there is a limit to European integration. And I must say, in my opinion, that we are near that limit now. I believe that going into the ERM was a great mistake, and I'm sorry that we did it. We went into something when the time was not right. Let's never let that happen to our country again. And that is why together we say no to abolishing the pound for the foreseeable future. Our beliefs and our values matter now more than ever. So don't tell me this country doesn't need a Conservative party. Don't tell me Conservative values have no relevance for the future. Don't tell me we've got nothing to fight for. The family that works hard, saves hard, tries to be independent of the state and believes in their country, we are on your side.
Bye.